So, I think you have to click the accept. Yeah. So thanks you all for joining us on this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. My name is Bill Lyons. I'm the president of the Ohio Community Rights Network, and we have Susie Beiersdorfer with Ohio Community Rights Network and Joe Masovich. Am I pronouncing that right, Joe?
Mozioski.
Sorry, Moziowski. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I've heard worse.
Wait, I don't know. I was thinking of somebody else who's good. Moziowski. Okay.
Yep.
So I don't pronounce his name very often. His last name. I just say Joe. Okay. So yes, this one is on the Industrial Excess Landfill, and Joe's going to be doing most of the facilitating, and I'll let him introduce Chris Borello and tell a little bit about her. She's joining us by phone. And then we will have, if you didn't get a chance, we'll play that short clip video and then get started, and hopefully we leave some time for some questions. Yeah, so please, Joe, take it away. And just one thing to remind you that we are planning to do, this is our third one, the last Wednesday of every month at 6 o'clock. And if you like our work, we'd be happy if you consider donating to us. But if you go to our webpage, OHCRN.org, you'll be able to find more information. And we'd be grateful. We know we don't get many responses, but if you get sent out a little bit later an evaluation, we'd appreciate that if you'd give us any of your comments. Yeah. And before I forget it, I guess I might as well say one more thing that we have, and you can order on our website, our book that, let's see, you might not be able to see it very well there. Okay, I guess that's better. It's called Death by Democracy, Protecting Water and Life, Frontline Stories from Ohioans Fighting Corporate and State Power. Tells the stories of 7 of our community rights groups throughout Ohio and our experiences in trying to protect water and life. So I'll let Joe, who is a board member of Ohio Community Rights Network out of Portage County, go ahead and take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Bill. Greetings, everyone, including old friends. Welcome to Ohio Community Rights Network third monthly podcast. This one's called Industrial Excess Landfill, Ohio's Regulatory Train Wreck. You'll see after I go through this why that's the title. The train wreck in East Palestine was sudden, spectacular, and tragic. The train wreck in Lake Township, Stark County was ongoing for 40 years plus. It's visually not that sensational, but it's tragic more so by the myriad of illnesses, miscarriages, cancers, birth defects, autoimmune diseases, thyroid diseases, and death. Now, I'd like to give you some background on Industrial Excess Landfill. And Susie, if you could go to the map, 1134, the first one. There you go. Thank you. The Industrial Excess Landfill is in northern Stark County in Lake Township. It's a 30-acre site. It's near the center of town, as you can see from the aerial. It's a former sand and gravel pit. It's on top of a hill. It was mined down to just above the water table. It's unlined and filled back in with a hodgepodge of industrial solvents, rubbish, toxins, debris, coal fly ash, and even evidence of nuclear waste. Some of the potentially responsible parties were the Akron rubber industry, Goodyear, Goodrich, Firestone, General Tire, and even the U.S. Army. It was rated the 4th worst Superfund site at one time in the United States. Susie, if you could show that number 2. And there's a box load of information on this. It's just a real disaster. Now the first question I'm going to ask is the first thing I want you to keep in mind is do the regulatory agencies that we were always told set up to protect us, did they do their job? Keep thinking of that in this whole thing, because that's key to this disaster. Another question: does this geology lend itself to be an ideal candidate for an industrial landfill? Close to town, 30-acre site, sand and gravel pit, unlined. What if I told you that over 3,000 people lie within 1 mile of the site? All at one time were on private water wells. Now I'd like to run a little 6-minute video to give you a little more background. This video is about 20 some years old, but it just gives you a little bit of history.
I'm doing it here. Just
You got it.
There you go.
Next on Channel 3 News at 11.
I think there is substantial evidence that the United States government dumped waste material into that site.
Lethal landfill, a startling target-free investigation. Next on Channel 3 News at 11.
And now, live from WKYC's Digital Broadcast Center, this is Channel 3 News.
Illness.
It's very hard to watch somebody you love waste away.
Death.
He started out at about 185 or 90, and he weighed less than 120, and he died.
And accusations of a dark conspiracy surround a local landfill.
The lab found plutonium, but by that time they'd already sealed up the well for another purpose.
Insiders say it's a cover-up at one of the highest levels of government. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tim White.
I'm Ramona Robinson.
For nearly 3 decades, 780,000 tons of hazardous waste and perhaps even radiation has been in the ground in Northeast Ohio.
Target 3 investigator Dave Summers joins us now with a startling look at what some call a dangerous disgrace in our own backyard. Dave?
Tim and Ramona, by today's standards, what and how waste was buried in the Industrial Excess Landfill, or IEL, at the height of the Vietnam War would be considered illegal. The U.S. and state EPA's own tests reveal killer chemicals and radiation in the dump. Still, no cleanup. Perhaps more startling than that, Target 3 Investigations tracks down the EPA insiders who are calling it a government cover-up at the Superfund site. The site is located just north of Canton. What whistleblowers have to say could impact Superfund sites nationwide.
I see the major problem at IEL being the bureaucracy goofed. They didn't do the job right in the first place, and they don't want to admit that mistake and do it right now.
Arguably, chief investigator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Ombudsman's Office, Hugh Kaufman, is the leading authority on problems at Uniontown's Industrial Excess Landfill. He is an EPA insider whose job for the last 3 years has been investigating potential wrongdoing in the cleanup of America's most dangerous dump sites. IEL is one of those.
It's a complex case where the regional office in Chicago, Region 5, apparently did not follow EPA procedures prior to coming up with a recommended remedy.
In the details lie the mystery that has plagued investigators in the community of Uniontown for some 30 years. There was evidence of radiation here that the U.S. EPA discredited. There were accusations of water and ground test tampering by Region 5 investigators that some say led to a premature cleanup solution.
The remedy that we selected in 1989 was appropriate for the landfill, and that any subsequent information that has been brought to light would not negate that original 1989 remedy.
Director of EPA's Superfund Division, William Munoz, defends EPA Region 5's testing and the proposed cleanup that is yet to be implemented.
Given the fact that we address those immediate health and environmental concerns, I'm less concerned that it's taking us a bit longer to ultimately implement the final remedy.
Munoz says the final remedy will include a plastic cap over the 30-acre site and/or new trees and plants to help release naturally the poisons that lie deep below the surface. But below the surface...
Well, I think you have actually a fairly typical list of all of the synthetic organic chemicals that have been used in industry since World War II.
It is a list of substances the Agency for Toxic Chemicals says are linked to cancer, birth defects, and death. There have been TCEs, PCEs, heavy metals, all detected in the landfill in high concentrations. In 1991, Tom Grumley was appointed by then head of the federal EPA, Bill Riley, to troubleshoot EPA Region 5's investigation into what went into the landfill.
They were playing the game that Johnny Carson made famous, Karnak, in which they had the answer before they really knew what the question was.
Of course, if you don't look, you don't find. So they can say they didn't find anything.
New York scientist Dr. Marvin Resnikoff was hired by the citizens of Uniontown with EPA grant money. He found perhaps the most startling of the landfill secrets, radiation. In his 1993 analysis, Resnikoff points out a state EPA test that shows radiation levels in a monitoring well at 140 times the naturally occurring rate.
They had high gross alpha measurements, and they couldn't account for where that alpha is coming from.
And when Resnikoff says alpha, he means radiation. The question, of course, is where did all of these contaminants come from? Who was doing the dumping at IEL? Over the next several nights, Target 3 uncovers evidence that points to the U.S. military, but the EPA identifies the primary polluters as Bridgestone, Firestone, B.F. Goodrich, and General Tire. Court records obtained by Target 3 indicate an Army nuclear biological chemical unit dumped there. Plus, as the story unfolds, of course, we're going to show you a study that indicates several unusual cancers in that area, cancers that have been linked to the chemicals that have seeped out of this landfill and made their way into residents' well water.
Well, Dave, if regulation and records were so scarce, how do we find out today what's in the landfill?
It's kind of paleontological. It's kind of like that we find out about dinosaurs in the same way. Tim and Roland will taste of the landfill users through its receipts, court documents, workers, and Uniontown residents. Coming up tomorrow, we'll take you to Southern California, where a former IEL worker now lives. He has some stories about the landfill that will make your hair stand up. Wait till you hear from him.
Dave, we'd just like to say that we're glad you're here. Dave is one of the most respected and toughest investigative reporters in Northeast Ohio. We're glad you're with us.
And a good guy.
Thanks, Susie.
Side effects of type 2? Losing a foot. Anyone who's been on metformin for more than 60 days needs to see.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Before I go any further, I'd like to welcome Chris Borello, president of Concerned Citizens of Lake Township. She's been fighting for 40 years for a real cleanup. She's on the phone to answer any questions once this is over. How do you do a site like this for 40 years and keep going is amazing. But anyhow, my hat's off to you and thank you for being on the phone. Okay, what's the first step in solving a problem? It's kind of a rhetorical question, identifying it. Oddly enough, no core sampling grid was ever performed across the 30-acre site of Industrial Excess Landfill, ever. If you don't look for something, how can you find it? If you find something like radioactivity, do you confirm that finding by plugging up that monitoring well and 32 others, then looking somewhere else for what you found? That actually happened at Industrial Excess Landfill. The former owner testified in court that nuclear waste was buried at Industrial Excess Landfill. Now I'd like to talk about the final 2002 record of decision of USA EPA's cleanup of IEL. They were proposing a semi-impervious vegetated cover about 4 inches thick, the monitoring of the groundwater and the gases, new monitoring wells after plugging up the 30-some that they plugged, a brand new fence around the perimeter, deed restrictions, providing a limited public water supply, additional studies down the road, and monitored natural attenuation. Now, what's the definition of MNA, monitored natural attenuation? It's this. It's an in situ treatment to reduce the contamination in soil and groundwater using naturally occurring processes in the soil. This treatment acts without human intervention, and the activity focuses on the verification and monitoring of processes to assure their sustainability over time and other effectiveness. Yeah. Now, is MNA the most appropriate method to clean up a 30-acre landfill as deep as a football stadium and with 780,000 tons of not fully identified hodgepodge of industrial, commercial, household, and possibly radioactive waste? How much of the attenuation is due to dilution and migration? How far and fast can liquid and gaseous waste streams travel in sand and gravel soils? We've been told about 6 feet a day. If you take 6 feet a day times 40 years in a homogeneous soil, that would be about 16 miles out. Yeah. Now, granted, this is a glaciated area and the soils nowhere in Northeast Ohio are homogeneous, but there is definitely a dilution and migration problem at IEL. Now, is MNA proactive or reactive when considering the health, safety, and well-being of neighborhood residents? How long do you let residents ingest contaminated groundwater before testing, then informing them that they must abandon their private wells under the threat of civil penalties and fines and hook up to a private, public, or a public water supply? Is the well abandonment really the elimination of evidence should they decide to sue for their property damage? Who pays for the ensuing monthly water bills? How can you put a price on clean, perpetual groundwater? In my mind, MNA means nothing accomplished because dilution is their solution. Now, to contain leachate from an unlined landfill is an on-site pump and treatment system desirable to contain liquid toxins to a minimal area. Yeah, I would say that was originally proposed at IEL, but it was killed in the final record of decision. Which leads me to the next question. How do you treat radioactive waste to render it non-toxic prior to discharge off-site?
Joe, just a minute. I know there's a lot of things coming at people. I just want to ask them if they have questions. You can raise your hand. Maybe if you don't understand some of the terms or whatever, or put them in the chat, or you can speak them if you'd like there. Just we want you to understand what's happening here.
Thank you, Bill. I don't believe there's a wastewater treatment plant in America that knows how to treat radiation and render it inactive. Okay, to treat explosive gases from a landfill, would a gas venting and burn-off system be appropriate? Yeah, probably. How would said system eliminate or neutralize a radioactive component in the gases? Maybe that's why we don't have one at IEL, because presently no gas venting burn-off system exists there. But hey, IEL has a cap as thick as a pencil and a brand new fence. Next question. Is dumping 11,000 gallons per day of liquid industrial waste and solvents into an open lagoon the best method of disposal? That went on for years at IEL. And Susie, if you could please go to the third visual. That's the waste lagoon that they were dumping this stuff in forever. It's been said there's at least 1 million gallons of waste dumped or in barrels buried at IEL, and we've had talks of maybe way higher than that number, but we have verified in writing at least 1 million gallons. Compare that with East Palestine folks. They were dealing with 200,000 gallons. Unreal. Now, if you could go to the next visual, please. That's from the Stark County Health Department. It's a cease and desist order for the elimination of the 11,000 gallons per day that were being dumped into a former sand and gravel pit. Now,
Joe, can I ask a question? Who did
Sure.
that cease and desist order go to?
To the owner.
And who was the actual owner?
A gentleman named Charles Kittinger.
Was he from Canton or Stark County?
Yeah, he was local. Yeah, he wasn't out of state or anything like that, Lori.
Thanks.
Yeah. Now, I got a couple of quotes from the 2002 record of decision. This is right out of the decision to give us the 4-inch cap and the brand new fence. Quote, a groundwater plume outside of the landfill no longer exists. 2, there is no indication of a contaminant plume at IEL. 3, EPA sees little possibility of an adverse impact on human health or drinking water supplies. Residents living near the landfill who are down gradient are connected to a municipal water system. In the event of an unexpected negative change in groundwater quality, EPA would have ample time to address it before contamination reached any potential receptors. Nor does EPA foresee any adverse impact on other groundwaters, surface waters, ecosystems, sediments, air, air or other environmental resources as a result of choosing MNA rather than a containment remedy. 4, outside of the site, groundwater is already meeting, for the most part, drinking water standards. 5, the amount of contamination coming off the landfill in recent years is so small that it does not lend itself to an active remedy. In a February 17, 1999 memo, William E. Munoz, U.S. EPA Regional 5 Director of the Superfund Division, stated this: there's clearly no groundwater problem that would justify implementation of a pump and treatment system, nor is there likely to be one in the future given the construction of a new cap. He also stated this: in any case, the remedial process under the National Contingency Plan is flexible enough to accommodate additional remedy changes later if they are determined to be necessary. Okay, let's fast forward to 2024. Right now, a 1,4-dioxane plume extends about 1 mile out from IEL. It's gone into the adjacent city of Greene in Summit County. Residents are being threatened with civil action and fines to seal up their wells and hook up to a public water mains. Since they were so wrong at IEL with the 2002 record of decision, shouldn't the EPA be tripping over themselves to modify their quote unquote cleanup at IEL? Where have been the public meetings? I don't believe we've seen one in over 20 years. What are they doing with the estimated 150 tons a year of volatile gases emanating from the site? How could the combined professional expertise and resources of the US EPA, Ohio EPA, Ohio Department of Health, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, multinational potentially responsible parties, US Army, National Analytical Radiation Environmental Laboratory, and others allow a site as polluted as IEL to be simply covered with a 4-inch deep semi-permeable cap and surrounded by a chain link fence? Is it normal for a US EPA regional lab to be raided by the FBI for skewing test results? That actually happened in Chicago at the lab that was dealing with IEL's testing. Who pays for the property devaluation around the Superfund site? Why would property owners who want the publicity and notoriety of a Superfund site to simply disappear?
So, Joe?
Hey, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some of the details, I guess, I'm a little unclear. Like from what I understand, and maybe some others too, that this started during the Vietnam War. This site, and it discontinued the dumping back how many years ago? Or maybe Chris can answer that too. First of all, I just wanted to get that information out. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
And I wanted to add that when I watched the video for the first time, I then went to the YouTube site where there's a lot of other videos. So there's residents talking, and I'm sure that Chris knows some of those, and she could share with us.
So was was that cease and desist order? It was like 1972. Was that the last that they stopped it? No,
Bill. I think that was Bill.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we obtained a deposition from a bulldoze operator named Kenny Cataletti, and with the township lawyer. And after that cease and desist that Susie showed on the screen from, I think, was 1971 of the 11,000 gallons. 72.
Yeah.
Of 11,000 up to 11,000 gallons per day. Our deposition testimony from Mr. Cataletti showed that up to 60,000 more barrels from 72 to 74 were brought in. And some were buried. But I think your first question was regarding when the dumping itself stopped, and that was 1980. So they continued the overt, even though the 11,000 gallons per day was supposed to have stopped by the Stark County Health Department in 72. It kept on for 2 more years, go figure. But then the dump was not actually closed with sand and gravel in 1980.
And also, well, obviously these chemicals are leaching and in the air and all that, like Joe pointed out. What about the people who live nearby? What has happened and what is happening about that? What's the history of it, and how many people live nearby?
Well, when we were submitted to the National Priorities List in '83 by Ohio EPA, and they wrote greater than 780,000 tons of, quote, hazardous substances, which by our calculations was 30 times larger than the infamous Love Canal. If you all are old enough to remember Love Canal. So IEL is 30 times larger than that, tonnage-wise, as per Ohio EPA. I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, well, about the people living nearby and what's been happening, we know with the Love Canal. And in fact, they just had a special on PBS yesterday called Poison Ground about it. But here, this is certainly poison ground, and I keep thinking about Love Canal when I think about this thing here. But I don't know, and I imagine a lot of other people know. No, I remember I've watched a couple of the other videos about them trying to buy out some people's houses, sort of like the Love Canal, but they certainly have
Right.
not done an adequate job. So I think that's important information that maybe people might want to know also.
Well, right. And absolutely. And that's why I'm still doing this after 40 years. Because in all the what we know, and the bulk of our information were from experts like Julie Wetherington Rice, that has spent 30 years working on IEL officially under the township auspices or through our CCLT grant dollars or just on our own volition. And many other experts. We were the first citizens group in the nation to receive the Superfund TAG grant mandated by Congress. But again, back to your question, your key question, which drives me and Joe and my core group after, we're all gray-haired now and grandparents, is that we were young mothers and fathers in the beginning, is that nothing has been done. They stole our entire cleanup, and that was, I used to coin it, the bargain basement blue light special. Like if you all, again, dating myself here, the Kmart commercials with the blue light specials. So they supposedly, legally in 1989 said, okay, it's too big to dig up and haul away. However, we're going to isolate the waste in perpetuity, and those were their words. And I think one of the videos, Bill, that you referenced, you'll see the Region 5 PR guy, John Perricone. Oh, we're going to do, that was when the cleanup was hovering around 30 million. We're going to do the cap, proper cap, because like Joe said, it's pencil thin. And we're going to do a, cap to stop the rainfall infiltrating that was generating massive leachate. We're going to do a groundwater pump and treat system to, again, isolate the 780,000 tons of hazardous substances just 2 or 3 feet above the aquifer at a high water table, glaciated sand and gravel. High rate of flow according to U.S. Geological Survey team of up to 6 feet a day. And we're going to do an expanded gas control system. Why? Because the top risk assessment experts at ATSDR, God bless them, Dr. Mark Basher, flew up here, was horrified, literally was removed, and he personally, I can say this firsthand, we had people hooked up to bottled oxygen to breathe that were evacuated, as you mentioned. Those were just our border homes, 13 families. Evacuated to hotels under FEMA due to ATSDR and Senator Howard Metzenbaum. The one lady died, Mrs. Capper, before she ever got to see the insides of her new relocation home. Her lungs were burnt out. And Dr. Basher called me from CDC and said, Chris, I can't help you any longer. I've been removed from my position. Head of ATSDR risk assessment. Why? Because he dared to buck Region 5 and ask for an expanded gas control system to stem the tide of the 150 tons of toxic and radon and, God knows what else. And so nothing, that was all robbed from the community. And I know I have to inject here the poor folks that I inflict myself upon routinely in the, no frack group, and Susie and all the other folks. They know me pretty well, Bill, because it's a desperate situation where all I can back up everything I'm saying. Susie and Joe put on the screen just a fraction of the evidence that we have accumulated. And again, most of the evidence that we have come from independent experts, radiation experts, research and development folks from inside EPA, whistleblowers, truly whistleblowers, good guys, heads of M&A that Joe talks about, a top DOE radiochemist that I was freed up to talk about. Unfortunately, I learned about his passing last spring, David Sill, who helped us on fracking, who literally, and I know again, I don't want to, I'm not apologizing because I shouldn't have to, but I know people groaned. I have to say that last week when Kathy, and dear Kathy from Medina, I love her. We met over some fracking thing long ago at Stark Tech, but she sent out Justin Noble's book, his presser, and I wigged out. It's like East Palestine. My PTSD goes off the charts because, Justin did an amazing, incredible job, and kudos to him. And I copied in what I wrote. But he called me as he was traveling to Utah and writing the Rolling Stone piece, and I'm like, Justin, if you don't include how they're going to screw the fracking people that through our blood, sweat, and tears at Uniontown, please hear me. It's no good to talk about radioactivity, radium in the fracking waste, which we all know is there. And I wrote umpteen letters all these years, you guys know. But the thing is that they won't find it. And that's the legacy of Uniontown. And I told Joe this morning, I said, I don't know what else I can tell folks. It's so horrific, and I keep learning more and more. I've reconnected with our Wingfoot lady in Portage County, Mary Grimmett Trent, who's waiting for a, T-cell diagnosis on leukemia. And God bless Mary, and I found her after 10 years a week or two ago, and she's weighing in with Vinacoli, and now that I've turned them to loose, so they're writing back and forth fast and furious. But the bottom line is nothing has been done, folks. They have allowed our people, because the cover-up is so deep, and we warned them in the 80s, with our tag experts, Dr. Henry Cole, and he's 80 years old, and I pulled him out. I tracked him down. It took me 2 years, and I wrote Julie Rice. I go, Julie, I found Hank. And so Henry is writing Reagan at EPA in Region 5. He sent out a letter, and I copied you all a week or two ago. It's hideous. There are no words to express what they've done to our people. They continue to do to our people. Like Joe said, they lied. They said there was no plume going to the northwest after a PCE plume was found 30 years ago. Rich Shank, the former Ohio EPA director, got them against all whatever. And I'm saying too much, Joe. I'm sorry to take your time up. But I'll wrap this up. But nothing has been done on the gases. We have explosive levels of gases again being found. That's why we got a new fence. They moved the fence out, 50 feet, Joe? Out almost onto Cleveland Avenue, 3/10 of a mile. When you look at the map, this dump is in the middle of the town. And they have explosive gases again. And they are AWOL. They started finding these gases in 2019, the best that we know of. And they are still not meeting with the town. There's a blackout in the local media. I'll shut up now. But Bill, to answer your question, no, they have allowed our people to be exposed for the last 30 years. They denied the PCE came from the dump. They denied anything could get out. And now they've dug themselves such a deep, dark hole. We don't know what is going to happen next. But go ahead, Joe. But nothing is there. People are being exposed in their homes, and nothing is, well, a handful, 40 homes, I need to correct myself, quietly on the QT the last 2 years. Only the EPA has sent them privately and had EPA officials show up at their door, and the local health department, Summit and Stark County, knocking on their doors. Hey, you need to close up your well. You need to abandon it. And if you don't, we may prosecute you. I'm serious. I can send you the letter that went out to, the people. So that's what's going on now, is they screwed up here so badly, and there's no accountability. Okay, Joe, go ahead.
Well, I think you answered the very first question, Chris, is did the regulatory agencies actually protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people? And I've got just a couple more things. And my whole thing has been nothing but questions. So I'm sure you've got some of your own too. And I'll just a couple more. Do court settlements imposed with gag orders supersede the public's right to know when life, health, safety, and welfare are at stake? This is the system we have right now, folks.
Joe, I saw Lori had her hand up there, so I don't know if it's pertinent to that.
I had a question going back to those 40 homes that have recently been contacted this year. I don't know if Chris or Joe can answer this question. So you're saying that the EPA and the local health department contacted these homeowners, told them they need to shut down their residential water wells, go on to the public, hook into the public water system, probably at their own cost, correct?
No, the actual extension of the water line is done by the polluters, and the hookup will be by the polluters, but the monthly water bills, it's on them. And that's their, and we've had people.
And what is the reason that they're telling these people they have to do this or be prosecuted?
Well, it's the next question. How long have these people been drinking this poisoned water? Because it's so bad that they're being mandated to get rid of those wells. You're going to die if you don't.
Yeah. I mean, are these people even considering legal action?
Right.
Well, when you plug up a well, you're eliminating evidence, aren't you?
So the letter stating that they have to close up their well doesn't state why. Doesn't give any information. Is that what you're saying?
They're being mandated by the local health departments.
I understand that, but the health department doesn't tell them why they're being mandated.
Lori, it's regarding the findings recently, and I say recently sarcastically.
Yeah.
Back in 2019, they started finding in our 8 or 9 monitoring wells I guess they call it one of the forever chemicals, 1,4-dioxane. And so, and in my opinion, it's always, it's well, no, that's dioxin. This is dioxane.
This is a different one. Okay.
Yes, sir. But of course, it is being found now, reported as a TIC, a tentatively identified compound, that was most likely, in my opinion, always there. And we wrote countless letters questioning this very issue, that how can you, we've been told we have top secret waste, ultra hazardous waste, research material, in one ear and out the other. No problem. We're not seeing the short list that we chose to look for. And therefore, all these years, but that now I have to qualify that because it was under a TIC, a tentatively identified compound, probably always there. But again, they suddenly in 2019 started refining their capabilities, so they say, and I've done homework on that, and that's not really true either. They were finding it much, much earlier down in Florida and other places. But anyways, so that was, to answer your question, the rationale for the forced sealing. Pull your pump up, disconnect with your home, and if you don't, then we may prosecute you. That was what they wrote.
So for 5 years, these people have been drinking this water, at least 5 years, and
30
nothing
years,
was being,
yeah.
and nothing was
Well,
being
30, 40 years, yeah. No,
but you're saying in
correct.
2019, the monitoring wells, supposedly they found this one for.
Exactly. And but then they said, well, now that we found it in the test wells in 2019, we need to expand, and we don't want to talk too prematurely, I think was their language. And so then they drug it out, and what, 5 more
years. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So you see,
Joe,
again, my reaction to, and again, God help me if anybody misconstrues. I 110%, 150% support our fellow victims at East Palestine. I walk on eggshells every time I put something out that someone will run with it, and I'm being pitted against other victims, because that is the last thing ever in my heart, and Joe knows in my soul, and Lori, I think you know me well enough, and other folks, that I would want. But it is cruel. It is unimaginably sick and cruel how long we have languished. And yet 2 days ago, I had to do basically a sworn statement to our congressional and Sheriff Brown's office previously. They won't lift a finger to help us unless we, as myself as the leader of the citizens group, say I'm telling the truth of why I'm asking you for help. And this went on for a long time now. I'm getting off the subject now, but the point being, again, is the double standard is so egregious and unimaginable. And yes, again, not to be pitted against the folks, but nothing, to my knowledge, was found any wells over there. And I'm not saying their testing was kosher, because I don't know that, and I have my doubts based on Region 5's dealings with us. However, we've got 40 wells that we know of, and that was 6 months ago, that are contaminated and forced to be sealed up and disconnected. And there's a blackout in the local media. They won't tell the rest of the town. They will not tell the town what is going. Joe and I, he did a fabulous letter to the editor last month. They won't touch IEL with a 10-foot pole.
Why do you think that is? Why is the media
who's behind that?
Why aren't they covering this media throughout Ohio as well as local? I mean, yeah.
I've been told it's because, they've been sold off, and the Rep and the Beacon are, we had Bob Downing, he was wonderful, and Brad Davis at the Rep, and Lori Monswick at the Rep. Things have changed. The media is controlled. Well, that's the story that we've been told. But the editor 6 months ago, Kelly Beyer, did write about the explosive gases and the dioxane, and she got pulled off. She's not allowed to come. We have no reporter even assigned from the Beacon or the Rep. No one will cover us.
So it would take
They're not
someone
allowed.
like
They
a
are
Justin
not allowed
Noble.
to.
It would take someone
I'm sorry?
It would take someone on a national level like a Justin Noble.
Yes.
If somebody,
owns the Beacon and the Rep? Are they owned by Clear Media or whatever?
Gannett, I
yeah,
believe.
they own the Columbus Dispatch
Gannett.
too. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Gannett and USA Today.
And USA Today.
That explains
Yeah.
it.
So
You
you
know,
need somebody like from another person from either Rolling Stone, The Intercept, Public Herald, somebody else who comes out and does stories on this then, right?
Well, we keep trying.
Yeah.
Trust me, we we beat the bushes. We try, and again, hopefully, I copied Justin and what I wrote. It's like, Justin, it's great you did that book, but if that's what he talked about driving out to Utah with me, is that they will. What good is writing about the radiation at IEL or in the fracking waste if they are able to hide 99% of it through bogus testing? And that's honestly, you guys, that's IEL is a horror story that we continue to live. But if anybody asks me, the overarching story is the real big fish, the nuclear power industry, DOE, DOD. They don't want this known. They have big plans for Vina's site down there at Portsmouth, our sister site at Wingfoot in Portage County. Wingfoot was the precursor to Portsmouth, according to NRC. And we figure we got their waste dumped here too. And so, they don't want this dirty 900 method that everybody's so sick of hearing Borello and Julie talk about, but it can mask the levels so that they get away continuing murder. They murdered our people, our kids, my neighbors. People say, well, how many in your group now? I'm not ashamed to say, we had 300 on our mailing list, but, a lot of people have died. Some of my board members have cancer right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the story that Justin, that I try to convey, and it's not a criticism, it's just that, people glaze over. Well, that's in the weeds, I'm told. Even the people like, Greg Schwartz, that did an amazing story, still following us. He grad student from Kent State in journalism. He's stuck with us, but I drive him insane, and he drives me crazy. Joe will send you, if he hasn't already, the 4-part series that Greg did, and he did an earlier one, Buried Secrets, that's on our website from 2006, and when he just had graduated from Kent. And so, but he's like, Chris, you're in the weeds. It's too detailed. But I'm like, I fight back. If we don't give those, the devil's in those details, folks.
Yeah.
The devil is how they're going to screw. So you can have a wonderful book written about radiation and fracking, and if they continue doing, and let me say this, one more thing. There were so many, and the real story about IEL is also the whistleblowers. We had so many good people inside Ohio EPA. ATSDR, I mentioned Dr. Basher, that was removed as head of risk assessment for daring to push the gas system that they reneged on. Now, it's gone. But they had to move the fence out because the gases are explosive now. The reason why they moved the fence out, because they didn't want anybody with a lit match, as the story goes. This is what a reporter told me. They didn't want anybody to be walking on the dump with a lit match or a cigarette.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. But whistleblowers got removed, and the NARL is still allowing the 900 method. Whistleblowers tried for 15 years to stop John Griggs at NARL from using the 900 series meant for finished drinking water only. Raw water was not acceptable. He continued. He allowed it on fracking waste. And they told me at research that they thought after 15 years they had got him to agree to stop using it by 2000.
Well,
No,
Chris,
he allowed the PRPs to do it, and that's why we're in the pickle that we are now. And same thing with fracking.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad people stay on. Maybe we can stay on a little extra for a few minutes there. I know Greg has a question. Before he does, Greg Coleridge, I wanted to point out what he said, and I think that's important. The really big story, and it's of course a recurring one in many examples of the collusion of government, public officials, corporate polluters, and the so-called regulatory agencies that we think are, like Joe had mentioned, are protecting us. But they're not, screwing the people and the environment there. And so that's why we at the Ohio Community Rights Network are fighting for our right, our local self-governing right, to protect ourselves from these kind of harms through community rights and even rights of nature, that you can't just put a bunch of pollution and destroy ecosystems or destroy an environment just to put a bunch of toxic chemicals with no accountability. So these are things, if the people really had to say, rather than the agencies telling you to accept this kind of testing or this condition or that condition, that the people who live there should be the ones, and I think most people would agree, who decide for their health, welfare, and safety. Greg, yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Bill. With the ODNR, their 2017 testing with the whole Aqua Salina thing, and which basically ended up with ODOT stopping to use, brines on the roads. Wasn't that the 941 they were using? I don't know, Chris, do you know what they were using there?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. What was that again?
I'm sorry, I don't have my good microphone. ODNR in 2017 with the whole Aqua Salina thing, and they found all the huge amounts of radium 226 and 228. Weren't they using the 941 for that? I assume for the first time they actually were using the correct testing.
Boy, the 941, I don't know. I went after ODNR and ODH's Michael Snee because they were using PACE labs. And from my knowledge, they were still using one of maybe it was 903.1, but there were questions about that, and SNE and ODNR told me go talk to PACE Lab. And so I went to PACE Lab, and I never got a straight answer, and I have the paper trail on that. So to answer your question, I am not familiar with the method that you just cited. It's possible that they ended up making a self-correction, but from all that I recall, and this has been how long ago now, they were still doing the 900 series.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Just wanted to leave that opportunity open here in the last few minutes that we've got, and then we can let last words, and then I can just say a couple things there with this nightmare that's going on.
Bill, I just like to kind of paraphrase what Greg Coleridge said. Basically, our political system has failed us. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. They won't give us the time of day.
Yeah. So one final question that I have, Chris, is, how toxic this is, so what do you really want that hasn't been done to buy out the homes of the people within in a certain vicinity of this and relocate them like they did in Love Canal? or something else? What is your ultimate really desire from this madness that's been
Well,
inflicted upon you?
Bill, we had 13 homes bought out and relocated. Those were our border folks
Yeah.
that lived right literally on top of the dump. But we have people a baseball's throw away that are still there. And I don't know how realistic seeking such a buyout is. What we have said, and I continue to say, is we want the exposures to stop. And by
How will they do
saying
that? Yeah.
well, they can start by giving us a cleanup back. I mean, they took our entire cleanup that they promised the town in perpetuity. They swore up and down that they would consider it a worst case scenario. Those were Region 5's words to us. We don't need core samples. We don't need any of that because we're going to isolate the groundwater. We're going to cap it, and we're going to collect the gases, and therefore we're going to mitigate any migration outward. Well, guess what? The companies took over and the government, and they said, hey, let it all out. Let its dilution is the solution to the pollution. That's the real truth. And my opinion is it's to keep the levels of the nuclear waste in compliance. It's all about the numbers game to keep the plutonium, the technetium-99 with a 212,000-year half-life that should be handled, quote, in a glove box, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Keep it all diluted and remember, high rate of speed, flow, 6 feet a day, glaciated sand and gravel. So it's a perfect scenario for dumpers. Out of sight, out of mind. And it's probably why they chose here in the first place. Put it in there, and I've always said they treated us like their chemical toilet bowl.
Yeah.
And a high rate of flow. So my druthers, our request would be to have DOE, the Department of Energy, assume responsibility. Region 5 backed out the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in 1994. They woke me up after hooking me up to, they were investigating Wingfoot in Portage County, about 2.5 miles away from IEL as the crow flies. And so then they put me on a speaker box, and 2 mornings later, the NRC from Region 3 was saying, here's our action memorandum, recommending to our supervisors that we take, this is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, take over IEL and conduct, quote, full-blown field studies, core samples, the gases, the stream. Didn't happen. The Ohio Department of Health, which we haven't discussed tonight, that figures quite prominently in all of this, unfortunately. Before there was any Ohio EPA, it was ODH in charge of IEL. And the belief is that they enabled the Army to dump here, along with the Stark County Health Department through sources that are in the know in the county. And so our choice would be to have DOE, and rightly so. It's their waste ultimately. The tritium, the plutonium, the Tech-99 may have been used by Army, but ultimately I've been told legally it's DOE's authority. But like the NRC, they have to be brought in here. And Region 5, to my knowledge, have thwarted at every opportunity DOE from coming in here or NRC. They were backed away. And so people have to ask, why would US EPA not want to get rid of us? Why not allow DOE to come in here with the money? Hanford in Washington State, DOE's budget is $1.2 billion, I was told, a year on cleanup. What did we get? Bird feeders. That's what we got.
Yeah, there's a
An
question.
offense, like Joe said.
A question
Go
about that.
ahead.
The investigative reporter Sandy had. What happened to him? And I would say, what happened after these stories came out? Was it 20 or so years ago? Did it just stop and that's it? Did that reporter, or the story or the news station pick up much more from what happened after that 20 years ago?
Channel 3 that you watched at the beginning of this did an amazing job. They flew to San Diego and Washington, D.C. and put people on camera. We heard that the manager lost his position at Channel 3 for refusing to take down our story. There were additional segments that we were told, there were additional that aired, but there were others that the behind-the-scenes investigator said they had in the can, and he said in good time. Well, that didn't happen. And so, needless to say, as you all might imagine, the political pressure. They squeezed our township that used to be fully supportive. They flipped and went after my group. We were smeared. Our grant experts, like Dr. Cole, were smeared. Dr. Michael Kidder, Dr. Bascaron from Wayne State University, Julie Rice, we were all smeared and attacked. So to answer your question, what happened to the media, what happened to all of it, everybody got squeezed. At the end of the day, that's the long and the short of it. Now, is there any justice left for us? I don't have the luxury of quitting because I know too much, and I won't quit. And seriously, the babies, the children, the kids with leukemia, the brain tumors, I've seen too much, lived too much. The fear for my own children's health after what we were all exposed to. And Vina Collie's the same way at Portsmouth and all the workers down there. We won't stop, and that's where we're at today.
Well, we want to thank you for continuing on with this amazing struggle, which shouldn't have happened, and it should have, you should have got proper action, and having to continue to fight this 40 years later. Well, that's amazing commitment, but like you said, it's if you care about people, that's what you have to do. I'd like to thank you and Joe for bringing this to everyone's attention, and continue to follow and learn more. There's some links in the chat there about some. I think there's some. Are those videos, Susie, that you put links to?
There's a podcast, the things that Joe had sent, and then there's the 4 articles, and I didn't know what they were, but then Chris talked about them. I forgot his first name now. Was it Greg Schwartz from Kent?
Greg Schwartz from Kent, right.
Okay, I didn't write that in, but those are 4. That's the sfbayview.com that came out in 2020. I was trying to find, and I'm going to put this link in, the YouTube link to the Uniontown, Ohio landfill. So I did a search. I think, if you click on that, you will go, and there's other clips. I mean, amazing.
In YouTube, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And thank you for saying that, Susie, because, again, we are what we are now, make no apologies, but those show hundreds of people at our town meetings, meeting after meeting after meeting for years. And some of those people are gone, my God. But that they fought their hearts out, their souls out. I started round 2. Larry Prince started round 1. He's gone. So the people, when the dump was in operation, they fought and they fought. I was still in high school.
Wow.
So that's how long it's gone on. And I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all our people. It means so much to me and Joe and others that Greg Coleridge was my mentor forever. He got me through so much for years and did the FOIA lawsuit, him and Warner Mendenhall. They they put AFSC up and helped us trying to get records, documents. Unfortunately, a judge in Akron killed it, but we were close, and we, so many people, like I said, the whistleblowers from the state, the federal agencies, people trash, but there were many good people that I still believe in. DOE, David Sill that helped us on fracking. So, just please keep that in mind, that so much legacy, so many people tried to help us, and they cannot be in vain.
Yeah, it's good people in a big
system. They can't be in vain.
People can be good. It's the system that's messing it up, and that's what's wrong in the way it operates.
And Chris, your persistence. I mean, that's what keeps these things. I mean, people being aware of them, and you never know when.
Well, I'll just wrap up.
We keep trying, and thank you again. I thank you all. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. We're all in solidarity with you. And I'm sure people who didn't know as much will be following more. And I've got more to learn too. And it seems like it's Ohio's Love Canal times 30, like you mentioned there. So
And we will be, we'll put the recording of this on YouTube, and then it will be on our website also, along with the previous two.
Send me the link. Will you send me the link? Because I'm a kindergartner on the internet. Joe knows I'm bad.
Yes, I certainly will.
But I'd love to. I'd love to have the link to it so I can send it. I'll send it to. I'm in communication with one of the Channel 3 guys, so I'll send it to him. It'll do his heart good because they all fought for us. So
great.